Hey guys, like I promised, this is gonna be my review of Final Fantasy VIII. I'm still new at this, so I'm not going in any particular order. Okay, I'm just going randomly. Before I do reviews of other RPGs, I wanted to cover Final Fantasy because that's the RPG I have the most experience with. So I want to do this first before I get into anything else. I just kind of wanted to clear that. All right, so let's start with some background for Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy VIII came out in 1999 and it continued the Seven's sort of theme where it was sci-fi and futuristic rather than more of a fantasy aspect. The game took place in an unnamed world, and it centers around sort of military schools called gardens, with its cadets or soldiers, whatever you want to call them, as seeds that whose job it is to basically try to stop the sorceress from taking over the world, whoever the sorceress might be. So we have only, I believe we only have 6 playable characters. And the thing about this game is because of the junctioning system, we didn't have things like armor that was able to equip to your characters, which was different. You know, some people didn't like that. But it was interesting because you were able to sort of do whatever you want with each stat, but you actually have to have the ability to actually be able to control each stat, which you really can't do for everything until basically the end of the game. 8 was considered like a couple of others to be sort of like the black sheep of the Final Fantasy family because it's either a lot of people either really like it or a lot of people really don't like it. And one of the main reasons why a lot of people didn't like it is because it wasn't Final Fantasy VII Part 2 or a sequel, which, I think is sort of pretty ridiculous because, since it's a different number, you're really not going to expect it to be a continuation of 7 unless it actually says it in the title. So first, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay, it's turn-based strategy just like the other games were. But a lot of things were really different throughout this game. Well, number one was the junctioning system, which means that if you have a certain number of spells, you could junction them to different statuses to either improve the statuses, or if you take some spells and junction to your elemental defense, you can have protection against that specific spell. For example, if you put Blizzard on your defense, it's gonna block against Blizzard to a certain degree. Unless you have the highest number of spells and everything goes past 100 and you start absorbing it, that's pretty good, but that also doesn't happen to late game either. A lot of people have problems with the junctioning because at times it was overly complicated. I personally didn't think it was really that complicated to begin with. You just have to play around with it for a bit. The thing that I didn't like about it the most was the draw system. Basically, each monster has a different spells you can actually draw from it, but that also is dependent upon the monster's level, etc. The problem is because drawing 100 spells for each character could take so long, it becomes extremely tedious. The only remedy that you can have for that is either refining cards and stones to get the spells so you don't have to draw for such a long amount of time. Or another trick that I found out is that if you just make your magic stat really, really high, every time you draw, you're gonna get a lot of spells from that one draw. Which sometimes, especially for higher level draws, you can sometimes get 2 or 3 at a time. So you can be sitting there forever getting 100. But if you have a higher magic stat, yeah, you can actually draw a lot at a time, which makes it a little shorter. But still, it's still tedious. That's really the one thing I didn't like about it, is that it was a good idea to be able to control each and every stat of your characters, but getting all the spells was so tedious at times. It just got almost annoying, and especially because you can actually break the system pretty early in the game. And in the first disc, okay, you can get some decent cards and refine them into spells and have ridiculous stats only for the first disc. Now, a lot of people complain about this because it's easily broken, but You don't have to do it that way if you don't want to. It's not forcing you to do it. I think it was a mistake by them when they developed it because they probably didn't realize, oh, well, people could just do this so early in the game and basically break it, so it's becoming a lot easier in terms of combat. The one thing that the game did have that was very interesting, it put more emphasis on items. Okay? The items were very important in this game because certain items could teach your guardian forces or your summons different different abilities and stuff like that, because in this game you learn a lot of your abilities from your GFs, your guardian forces, or your summons. And it wasn't like in 7 where it's materia and you could just use it like a spell. If you junction a GF to a character and that GF learns things like the ability to junction a lot of the stats, then you're able to do it on your character. Okay, and a lot of GFs also have a lot of abilities to refine items into spells, lower spells into higher spells, tools from certain items. It really put a lot of emphasis on the items, and that's what I was talking about, because items in this game can do a whole lot for you, unlike in 7. You can refine items into spells, you can refine them into the magic stones, into tools, and a lot of this is also done by the card game, which I'll get into when we talk about side quests. Okay, limit breaks also work differently in this game, meaning that if your HP is at critical, you're able to do limit breaks over and over and over again, and it's not like in 7 where you have a meter that builds up and you're able to only use that limit once. If your HP is in the yellow, you could just keep using your limit breaks over and over again until either you get more health or you die. Which, it was a decent concept, but a lot of times against a lot of, especially the stronger bosses and enemies, it was a pain in the ass to do. Unless you use something like Aura repeatedly and meltdown on a target to lower their defenses, then otherwise I never really found that to be the most useful. So, let's go into story. Well, the story really revolves around the cadets I was talking about, the seeds. And now, like in 9, there's romance plays a big part in this game, but that doesn't really happen until about halfway of the game is done. And it's between Rinoa and Squall. Now, I really didn't like Rinoa as a character because I just personally found her to be very, very annoying. I didn't find her to be a really interesting character because obviously the romance is between her and Squall, and a lot of people don't like Squall because they'll say things like he's emo. Well, I never really found him to be emo because, and this is why. I don't know if a lot of other people have ever been in military type schools, but I've been in schools like that. I've been in one school like that before when I was in high school, and Garden is basically a military school. And when you go to a school like that, you're not taught to talk about your feelings openly with a lot of people, which is why Squall sort of comes off as being cold, because when you're in military school, you're not said to give your opinion on how you feel and stuff. So when all the other characters are trying to get him to open up, especially Rinoa, telling him, "Oh, tell us how you feel. Tell us how you feel," he has difficulty. He has difficulty doing that because of the military type aspect. So when people say he's emo, I really don't see him as being emo. He's the product of a military school and of that, especially of that mindset, because also he's also put into a position of leadership that wasn't up to him. And if somebody just comes up to you and just makes you a leader of a gigantic school in battle, it's gonna be nerve-wracking. And then when somebody then says to you, "Hey, how do you feel?" You know, if you're used to not being open to other people, it's going to be hard to do things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think people get the wrong ideas, especially when it comes to Squall. He wasn't my favorite protagonist, but I can understand why he was the way he was. So the story basically revolves around not only the romance aspect between Rinoa and Squall. Obviously, it's also about the seeds and against the sorceress. The sorceress is supposed to be this evil ruler who causes the wars, who wants world domination and wants to oppress everybody. Typical sort of RPG type of thing. But you see, in this game, there's also one sorceress who's sort of in control of everything called Ultimecia, who basically ends up manipulating other people who have the sorceress powers within them, like Edea, like Adele. And she uses all this for time compression. And there's a lot of theories about sort of why this is so. Like there's one theory called the Renault Ultimecia theory. A lot of people don't follow it, but I found it to be very interesting because towards the end of the game, at the almost the very last scene, you see Ultimecia's face flash with Renault's face, and it's sort of being implied, especially in this theory, that Ultimecia is a future version of Renault who let the sorcerer's powers basically take over. And the background was that Renault lost all of her friends. The last person she lost was Squall, and the loss from all that basically allowed the sorcerer's power to take over her mind, thus becoming Ultimecia. A lot of people don't follow it. I think it's interesting. I don't want to sit here all day and argue for it, but I thought it was actually an interesting theory. It's better than the whole Squall is dead theory, where he's really dead throughout the game after the first disc, and he's just like a spirit. I really didn't buy that at all. But another reason why a lot of people didn't like this game is because that one particular scene, and those who have played know what I'm talking about, and that's the scene at Trabia Garden, where, spoiler alert, it's sort of revealed that all the playable characters grew up in an orphanage, and that Edea was sort of the caretaker, but they all sort of forgot because the Guardian Forces junction to them sort of screw around with your memory, and since Irvine didn't have that, he sort of knew the entire time that this was going on, which is one of the reasons why he freaked out with trying to kill Edea. Which makes sense. I personally, it didn't ruin the game for me. It really did. It didn't ruin the game, but I thought as a piece of literature, the storyline, I guess, it was sort of unnecessary to do that. They should have just picked a better reveal than doing it that way. A lot of people, it ruined the game for them, but I thought it was kind of ridiculous to base the entire experience off of that one scene that wasn't done well. Other than that, it wasn't a bad storyline. It really wasn't. Especially, and it had one of the best sub-main characters in the series in Laguna. I thought Laguna's story was very interesting, and I always thought if they actually did like a sequel or a prequel to the game, it should be based off Laguna, Kairos' and Ward's adventures prior to the events of the original Final Fantasy VIII. But that's just my opinion. That's another time, another place. So, let's go on and talk about the music. I thought the music was very well done. It's very hard to say that Uematsu's work sucks, because in pretty much all of his works, his music has always been awesome. While 9 is my favorite, 8 also fit very well for the setting and the feeling of the game. Now, there's no voice actors again, but the music, it's more futuristic, it's more sci-fi oriented. But I also thought it was actually very good because it conveys the message and the overall theme of the game, which is camaraderie. It's camaraderie. It's the romance aspect of it. I wasn't a big fan of the romance, mainly because I just didn't like Renault's character at all. I just found her to be very annoying. But that's not trying to insult anybody. Everybody has their own opinion. The presentation of the game was also very, very well done. They used character models that were, again, it was a lot better than 7's, but it was more realistic, human-like characters instead of, obviously in 7 you had the arms and the blocky look. It wasn't like that. The cutscenes were also very well done, too. And I've noticed about sort of like the backgrounds, it wasn't as fantasy as really you would think. It's more realistic, and I think that's what a lot of people liked about the game. I mean, I personally get the fantasy aspect better, but it still was a very beautiful game. Especially the cutscenes were very well done as well, very smooth. But we all have our personal tastes when in terms of like background settings and stuff like that. So let's talk about side quests now. Now, 8 had one of the more popular side quests, and Triple Triad, the card game. The card game I really liked because it had a lot of rewards. You know, it had a lot of great rewards that you get later on. But the problem didn't come from, the cards itself. The real problem was with the ridiculous rules they had for it. Oh my god. One of those rules to a lot of people was almost like made it impossible to play was random. Basically, you have your cards, and it randomly picks what cards you're going to use for whoever you're playing. The only way to really and it's made it especially difficult to do when you're trying to win a rare card from somebody and you can repeatedly lose and you have to reset. The only upside to it is that if you have a bunch of crappy cards and you just refine them all and you just have good cards, it can work out in your favor, but that only happens every so often. And it was not just the random rules, the other rules. It's the same wall plus, the combo stuff. It just, especially late game, it just made it very, very, very tedious to play. I personally didn't do the Queen of Cards side quest. I found it to be annoying to try to get her to go to the right places and give up the cards. Then you got to win the cards from other people. To me, what I always did was, and I don't know if anybody else does this, is that I wait until really the last point of the game where she's at the crash site and she has all those cards that you could have gotten earlier. She has them in her possession. So I just win all of them from her at that point and just refine them because honestly, I don't want to go around the world trying to make the Queen of Cards go to different places because it's just tedious and it's just annoying. There's also the Chocobo Forest side quest where 9 sort of got that idea from, but this one is kind of like, how would I describe it? You have to find the right order of Chocobos, and then you get the Chocobo, then you get stones from it. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, because the rewards weren't as great. And there's also, what is it? The Shumi Tribe side quest, That doesn't have great rewards either, it's just a lot of dialogue. It wasn't my favorite either, but then you had the other one, Mr. Monkey. You had the alien, the alien, where you get the card. You did get the Chocobo card from this forest one, which is decent, but, overall, that's really the only decent reward you get besides the stones. I thought it could have been done better. I mean, Nine's card game wasn't bad, but it really didn't have any rewards that were really that stupendous other than collecting them and auto life ability from the life ring or whatever it was. The card game, especially, if you can sort of manipulate the rules to your favor, which takes a lot of time too, trying to abolish rules and doing the soft reset and the hard reset. It wasn't a bad game unless you knew the rules that were working in your favor. It wasn't bad. I still, overall, it was a very different Final Fantasy, but I still enjoyed it. I still enjoy playing it, 15 years later. It's still enjoyable. And so, my conclusion, if you haven't played the game, you should, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan. It's very worth it of a game. There's a lot of quirks and obviously some drawbacks, but it's not to the point where it ruins the experience. It's still a very good experience. So those who haven't played it should, because it really is that good of a game. It's Final Fantasy. It's hard to say these days that a Final Fantasy game sucks. I'm going to say that for another video for the ones that I don't like. But yeah. So I'm gonna be doing later in the week. I'm gonna be doing probably 7 and 10 later in the week for reviews. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going in particular order. I'm just going in the order whatever I feel like doing. There is a couple of games I don't like. Right, so when I do those, and I'm gonna say give a brief warning before I do them. so no one gets offended. Because I know some people get offended, and some people are fanboys. I'm not gonna point anybody out, but some people are fanboys. And my reason for doing these reviews isn't because I want to piss people off or make people like me or stuff like that. I do it because I enjoy it. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube doing these types of reviews, and I enjoy them because it's different perspective than the other paid reviews that the bigger companies get, and it's good to see honest reviews. So, guys, I'm happy to do this. I hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you next time, guys.